So, this substance abuse that you're talking about, when does it really start? And how do these teenagers or young people get, accustomed to practices like these?
Yeah, I mean, look, there was a time when we arrested people for possession of marijuana, and now we're happy to just let them have it, and tax them on it. I mean, I just did a video, since you talk about Colorado. You're right. There was about 2 years ago, my wife and I were in Colorado we're in Denver actually, for a conference. We were there for about 3 or 4 days, and everywhere that we went, everywhere you could smell marijuana. And one night we went to dinner with some colleagues, and we were at a sushi restaurant. We were upstairs, and upstairs the entire restaurant smelled of marijuana. Two doors down was a marijuana shop, and it was coming in through the air conditioning. I mean, it was everywhere.
Don't you think that banning something that was banned before, uh, it doesn't really stop people from using it, right? So if you ban it today, do you think that would be effective enough, or there has to be some other laws that need to be implemented here?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, I mean, we use quite a bit of technology. I mean, we have a CRM, so Clio, CLIO, and we have Clio Grow, which is our intake CRM.
Hmm.
We use Clio Manage, which is our, client CRM. So every call that comes in, right, goes into Clio Grow. If there's a message through the website, it goes into Clio Grow. If there's a message that goes in through our chatbots, right, it goes into Clio Grow. Occasionally, I get an email from somebody. It all goes into Clio Grow, and it allows us obviously. So when somebody calls in and we are triaging the case, meaning we're having a conversation with the potential client about what happened, it's all going into the CRM, so that I can open it up and say, oh, I wonder what were what was the nature of the conversation, so that everybody in the firm can see the information. So when a paralegal goes to draft a petition, you know, she can read the notes and say, okay, now I have a general idea what happened here. So when they talk to the client, they don't have to go over the whole thing again.
So most attorneys talk about winning or losing cases. My next guest, Mark Astor, talks about saving lives. Mark is a former prosecutor turned advocate who has dedicated his practice to mental health and addiction law. He has been helping families navigate complex, emotional, and often very terrifying legal systems of Baker Act and Marchman Act. So, welcome to the show, Mark.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me as a guest.
Right. So, Mark, this particular niche in law is not very often talked about. Could you please explain what is this niche and what kind of people are you helping right now?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident in saying that we're the first law firm that was ever built anywhere in the country specifically to focus on this one issue, which is to save families whose loved ones are suffering from substance use, mental health disorders, and failed attempts at recovery. So we do just one thing. I'm not a lawyer that takes car accidents or divorces or criminal cases or anything else. I get calls on those cases and I send them to colleagues because it's not what we do. So we are taking calls from families from all over the country here. As far west as Hawaii, as far north as the whole New England corridor. And it's typically parents that call us because they have an adult child who has a long history of drug use and mental illness and treatment that never seems to work, if they'll even go. They're probably med non-compliant. They may well have been a guest of the state through either the criminal or the mental health system, maybe even an overdose. And they call us to fix that problem. And that's what we do.
Right. So, this substance abuse that you're talking about, when does it really start? And how do these teenagers or young people get, accustomed to practices like these?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a combination of drug use and mental illness. So I sort of call it the behavioral health issues, right?
Hmm.
Now, I will tell you, back in 2016, because last month was our 10-year anniversary. In 2016, in February of 16, when I opened up the law office, actually out of the local library here, my focus was on alcohol and recreational drug use. Okay, two things really changed the nature of the kinds of cases that we handle. COVID and the legalization of marijuana here in Florida. And since that time, our cases have taken somewhat of a shift into the mental health arena. The bulk of our cases are clinically challenging mental health cases. And, obviously there can be and typically is some substance use. We see a lot of marijuana-induced psychosis. So the legalization of marijuana, frankly, I think not just in Florida, but in other parts of the country, has been an unmitigated disaster. I think the states looked at it as a way to get rich and put money in their pockets, and now they're dealing with a mental health crisis that they can't afford to pay for. So most of our cases are of that nature. Now, some of these individuals who are using substances, some of them may have started at an early age in high school. Some of them may have been prescribed a medication much earlier on than that by a doctor, and that triggered things. So, we see a lot of people that have a long history. This has typically been going on 5 or 10 years or sometimes longer by the time they get to us. We're sort of the last port of call, right? When the family realizes that they need some help to really, stem the tide of the chaos, which is what their family has become. It's become chaos, and they can't take it anymore.
So let's suppose a family learns about the use of marijuana or any other substance when somebody's in high school or much before than that. Even before going to a expert like you, what should they do initially to stop it from happening in the very early stages?
Yeah, I think it starts with having a conversation. We now know, I'm a child of the 80s. I grew up in England in the 80s, and I'll be honest with you, I was a little bit ignorant about the whole idea of legalizing marijuana. When I grew up, I had a number of friends who used marijuana, and to be honest with you, I didn't consider it was going to be that big of a deal. Most of them, if not all of them, went on to have very productive lives. But the marijuana of today is not the marijuana of the 90s or even the 80s for that matter. It's very much more potent. And if there's any predisposition for mental illness, this is like pouring gasoline on a fire. And, a young person's brain is still developing until they're 25 years old. So I think it starts with having a conversation with your family members and saying, look, this stuff's dangerous and I don't want you to use it. Now, obviously, if it's starting to affect their everyday life and they're refusing to stop or even acknowledge that there's a problem here, then I think that we have to have a conversation. It doesn't necessarily mean you need a lawyer. That we have other options on the table that we offer families all the time. But I think you have to draw a line in the sand, unless, of course, you're willing to put up with the consequences of that, which we see a lot of. And it's not just marijuana. We now have kratom, which is, one of these sort of natural opioids that's being sold at gas stations. We have kids using nitrous oxide. There's a new phenomenon now called dusting, where they buy, a spray can of something, they spray it, and they're inhaling the gas that's used to expel whatever it is inside. So it's not just one thing, it's lots of things. And I think it starts with having a conversation with your loved ones about how dangerous this stuff is. And it will damage their brain permanently if it continues.
So I was looking at one of your videos where you talked about you visiting with your wife in Colorado. You were going to eat sushi, and then within the restaurant you could smell marijuana. It was very difficult for you or people who were not using it. On the state level, what do you think the states must do instead of just raising taxes or trying to trying to ensure that less people buy it?
Yeah, look, there was a time when we arrested people for possession of marijuana, and now we're happy to just let them have it, and tax them on it. I just did a video, it's interesting you talk about Colorado. You're right. There was about 2 years ago, my wife and I were in Colorado we're in Denver actually, for a conference. We were there for about 3 or 4 days, and everywhere that we went, everywhere you could smell marijuana. And one night we went to dinner with some colleagues, and we were at a sushi restaurant. We were upstairs, and upstairs the entire restaurant smelled of marijuana. Two doors down was a marijuana shop. And it was coming in through the air conditioning. It was everywhere. And actually, just yesterday, I did a video about this. The state of Colorado now is running on a budget deficit, Why? Because they have all these people who are suffering from mental illness that's been induced by marijuana, and they can't afford to provide them with services. So, this, causes have effects and effects have consequences. And you have all these people that are suffering because the marijuana today is very, very potent and frankly dangerous. And now they have a mental health crisis in Colorado and they can't afford to fix it.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, this is the problem here. And it's not just Colorado, it's everywhere. All these
Hmm.
states that have legalized marijuana are going to have a major headache on their hands. I think that mental health is going to be the number
Hmm.
one crisis that we face as a nation. I mean, get rid of all the noise that we see on the news about what's going on in Iran and other parts of the world. Forget all
Hmm.
that stuff. I mean, that is here now, but it will pass. This mental health crisis isn't going anywhere. It's going to get worse. And it's going to get worse because we've legalized marijuana, I think, now in about 40 of the 50 states.
Hmm.
I mean, what I see on a daily basis is just a microcosm of what we're going to see all over the country.
Right. So, don't you think that banning something that was banned before, uh, it doesn't really stop people from using it, right? So, if you ban it today, do you think that would be effective enough, or there has to be some other laws that need to be implemented here?
I think the train's already left the station. I think it's too late. Now you're right. I mean, people will, whether you ban it or don't ban it, people are always going to use it, right? I mean, there's no, we tried banning alcohol and look what a disaster that was. So
Hmm.
people are always going to use it. They're always going to have access to it. But we've now basically, blessed it, and now we have to deal with the consequence of that. So I don't think, it's too late to ban it. Here's what we need to do. We need to provide services for people that are suffering from a behavioral health issue.
Hmm.
That's part of the problem. We don't have equal access to clinically appropriate treatment for everybody. I mean, if you don't have, the financial resources or you don't have health insurance, your options are very limited. Now, here in Florida, we have, county facilities to treat people, but they're overwhelmed because the
Hmm.
majority of people cannot afford quality treatment. And so the answer is not to, try and cool the train back. The answer is to deal with the consequences and get people help. And,
Hmm.
I think there was some conversation about, I saw something, that our Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert Kennedy, says there's going to be money available for that. I'm always a little bit dubious when the government starts handing out money because we know that, a bunch of it's going to end up in the wrong person's pocket and that just encourages fraud. And as a general rule, the government makes a pig's ear of trying to fix the problems like this. But it sounds like it's well intended. We'll see if they can actually administer it without it going in the wrong pockets. So that's the answer. We're going to have to treat people.
Hmm. Definitely. Now, you talk about that obviously parents who are in crisis call you, right? So, Mark, addiction and mental health issues don't happen during 9 to 5 business hours, right?
That's true.
And and I read your website. It says your website mentions you'll drop everything to help. From a systems perspective, this is incredibly demanding. How do you use technology to ensure that when, let's suppose, a father or mother calls at 2 a.m. because maybe her son is missing or being held unlawfully, she gets an immediate empathetic response?
Well, look, I'm not 911. Okay, I mean the phones are answered 24/7 so that at least somebody can reach out to us, and we're normally back on the phones by, I mean our office hours are like 8:30 in the morning till 6:30. Actually, 8 o'clock at night we typically take the phone call up to. Now, obviously, if somebody calls after hours and I'm awake,
Hmm.
I mean I'll take the phone call, but I have to get a little bit of sleep, and so do my staff. And obviously, if you're dealing with a life and death situation, I'm probably not the first person you should be calling. You should be calling 911. But it's not unusual, if a case comes in at 6 o'clock at night, for my staff to work till 11 o'clock at night. I mean, we do that routinely. I try not to do it
Hmm.
because it puts an enormous strain on the staff. But it's not unusual for us to work late. I mean, really late. I think the latest I ever worked was until midnight. I mean,
Hmm.
actually, Thursday night here, I was in Naples doing a presentation. I drove 2 hours there to do it, drove 2 hours back, and I worked until 12:30 on an emergency petition that we're filing. So, I
Hmm.
mean, we will work late. Um, but if somebody's, actually in crisis, people should pick up the phone and call 911, and then we can follow it up. I
Hmm.
mean, I work within the confines of the court system. there's not a lot I can do at midnight. I mean, if you call me and say, my loved one's in crisis, I'm going to tell you to hang up and call 911. That's what it's there for. And then let's get back on the phone, you know, 7, 8 o'clock tomorrow, the following morning. But we do take calls. I mean, my phone is answered 24/7. I have receptionists that answer the calls, 24/7. The phone is never not answered. So I'm there for clients, you know, and we work, we do what we need to do to help
Right.
people. So, and it's not unusual for someone to call in the middle of the night and my receptionist will say, sounds like you need to call 911.
Right. Because the reason I asked was because I have worked with many PI firms and we've built, AI voice agents. Do you think in this scenario, when somebody is actually in stress, do you think implementing a voice agent in after hours is emotionally good for the person who's calling your firm? Yeah, the AI that takes calls and gives, takes the information and, tells them that you will be contacting them in the morning. Do you think in a high stress situation, a mother calling, and do you think they should be talking to AI or not?
I mean, I don't think AI is quite there yet. I mean, I've got 2 AI chatbots. I've got 2 websites, and both of them have an AI-based chatbot, and they're pretty good at responding to generic type of conversations. But I think if a mother calls in crisis, I think she needs to speak to a human being. I don't think AI is quite there yet with on the empathy scale. And I don't like it when I call and I get a computer on the other end. I mean, maybe we'll be there in the next couple of years where AI can really converse with us. I don't think we're there yet. And I don't think that a mother should have to speak to AI. I think she should speak to a real person, which is what we have. We have real people answering the phone, not AI.
Right, right, definitely. And moving on from this, I honestly did not know about Baker's Act and Marchman Act, and I'm sure a lot of my audience doesn't know about that. Could you quickly explain what these acts are and how do they, impact the people in Florida or even around the U.S.?
Yeah, so we operate under 3 statutes here in Florida: the Marchman Act, guardianship, and the Baker Act. And I'll break them down briefly for your audience. So the Marchman Act is a statute that is unique to Florida, and it allows us to put somebody into treatment for periods of 3 months at a time. So we get a 90-day court order, and it is intended when there is a primary substance use, so drug use, that we can prove. What's neat about the Marchman Act is that it can be initiated on what's known as an emergency ex parte basis. So I told you the other night I was up till, I don't know, 12:15, 12:30 working on this emergency petition. Excuse me. That was a request to a judge to give us a temporary order on an emergency basis. And what that meant was I was saying, Judge, I need a court order right now. And I don't have time for a hearing. We don't have time to appoint a lawyer. I want a court order based on what I send you. And it's called an ex parte petition, meaning the other side doesn't know about it. And there are certain circumstances when the court will grant what I refer to as extraordinary relief, right? Because we're basically going to take someone's liberty away and not give them any due process. In other words, they don't have a hearing. That one was granted. And so what's cool about the Marchman Act is I can initiate it really quickly. So depending on the county, the judge, how busy they are, normally that's a same-day process. I file my petition, the court rules, and says, yep, sounds like there's an emergency, and sends and will basically send out law enforcement and have the person served. You reminded me of something. I'm making a note here.
Yeah.
And send out the police to either pick the person up and take them somewhere, or in this case, the person was in treatment, but we were afraid she was going to leave because she had a history of leaving. And so we got a court order that told her, you cannot leave. And if you do, there'll be consequences. So that's Marchman. Primary substance use, 90 days of treatment, which we can, extend, right? We can go 90 days, 90 days, 90 days. I had somebody that came in from another state, and I had him in treatment for 2 years. And every 90 days, I went back and, asked the judge for another court order. So that's Marchman Act. Guardianship, every state has some form of guardianship. And it typically, we would associate it with elderly people. My wife is a genius with this stuff. I call her the guru of guardianship. And what she came up with was the idea of using the guardianship statute, which was really designed for elderly people, for people who are significantly younger but who have a behavioral health issue. So the Marchman Act is a very narrow form of relief, right? It just says Mark will go to treatment for up to 90 days. But what if the parents want more control than that? Because sometimes the situation could be out of control. For instance, they also want to access my medical records. They want to control my finances. They want to control where I live, who I spend time with. They want to restrict my ability to travel so I don't get on a plane and leave. They want to take away my driver's license. They want to take away my right to vote. They want to take away my right to contract, right? So there's a lot of rights that can be taken away and given to a guardian. In other words, taken away and given to somebody else to make the decisions for me, because I may not be objectively capable of making what we would consider rational decisions. And so we do a lot of guardianship work. And again, that has an emergency piece when there's a need for there's an imminent threat either to my person because of my conduct or my property. Maybe I'm using the money and I'm spending it on drugs or on gambling or on prostitutes. I mean, I'm giving you some examples here, but you get the idea. Now, it's not quite as fast as Marchman Act. It typically takes 2 to 5 days to get into court, but it gives significant control. And so we can normally get a temporary 90-day court order, right, at least initially. And while the case is moving through the courts, guardianship can become permanent until the judge says it's not permanent. So that's the guardianship. And sometimes we will do Marchman and guardianship together. Marchman's much faster, but guardianship gives you more control. And then the third statute we operate under is the Baker Act. So again, every state has a version of the Baker Act. We call it Baker Act because it's named after somebody whose last name was Baker. The Marchman Act is called the Marchman Act because it was named after somebody whose last name was Marchman. But they have statute numbers. Marchman is Chapter 397 and Baker Act is Chapter 394. Now, the Baker Act, as opposed to the Marchman Act, deals with mental illness, right? It specifically excludes substance use because that's why we have the Marchman Act. And it is a statute, that allows the state of Florida to take temporary custody of somebody because of a mental illness. So you remember I said to you, families can call us 24/7, and if I'm awake, I'll take the call. But I'm also not an emergency service. I mean, we do emergency filings, but I'm not 911. I have to, I can't wave a wand and take control of somebody. I need to go to the courthouse. I have to file things with the judge. That takes a little bit of time. What the Baker Act does is that when someone's in crisis, it allows somebody to pick up the phone, call 911, and the police can come down because, see, the police are agents of the state's criminal justice system. They can lock you up in the county jail. But the police are also agents of the state's mental health system. They can lock you up in Florida's mental health system and take you to a locked down mental health facility called the Baker Act facility. And what they do is, so if someone's in crisis or actively threatening to harm themselves, the parents can pick up the phone, they call 911, and they have the police come down, and the police can take custody of them as agents of the state and place them in a facility where they can get some help, right? It's a temporary fix, but you got to be careful with that because the problem with the Baker Act is it's very easily abused. When you get taken to the county jail because you've been arrested, you get to see a judge within 24 hours if you can't post a bond, which is great, right? The judge can allow you to leave. They can give you a lawyer, all that fun stuff. You get Baker Acted and nobody actually knows you're there. So unless the family calls me and I drag the state in front of a judge, you can get stuck there pretty darn easily. I mean, I file 250 cases a year to get people out of the Baker Act that shouldn't be there. So it's a useful tool and potentially life-saving when it's done correctly. When it's not and it's abused, it can be a significant problem. So, I mean, I run all over the state defending these cases and fighting these cases and getting people out because otherwise they can get lost in the shuffle. So those are the three statutes that we operate under, and sometimes, depending on the case, we might be operating under all three. I mean, somebody may be in treatment under a Marchman Act and a guardianship, and all of a sudden they are in need of immediate, of a higher level of care. Maybe they had a psychotic break, and now they're being transferred, say, from a treatment facility to a locked and secure, emergency Baker Act receiving facility. So that means 3 different causes of action, 3 courthouses, 3 judges. things can get a
Mm.
little hectic. And unless you understand how those three things work, this is why what we do is so unique. Oh, and by the way, I was a prosecutor in criminal defense attorney for many years. People get arrested too when they have behavioral health issues,
Mm.
and I see that pretty often. Again, I don't take those cases, but I understand how the civil and criminal
Mm.
worlds interact. And
Yeah.
again, that makes us very unique because even the lawyers that are out there who are trying to do what we do not have the experience that we have. So that it gives us a very unique perspective, and it also gives us a unique ability to handle these cases because we're not jacks of all trade. We're masters of
Mm.
one. And
Yeah.
understanding how the criminal justice system and the mental health system all work together is the key to success. That's the key to keeping somebody potentially out of jail or out of the mental health system and into a facility that can actually help them. Because that's when things can go sideways. You get sucked into our criminal justice system here in Florida, where the mandate is to punish first and rehabilitate second. It can become a real problem. So I think that really is what distinguishes us from everybody else who's trying to copy us. And there's plenty of copycats out there now.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And we'll come back to the niche part. But moving forward from here, so when somebody's in distress, right? So obviously, there is so much sensitive data that's involved in here. It could be medical records, history of substance abuse, family dynamics. So for a family in trauma, filing or filling out 20 pages of PDF forms is another secondary trauma, I think. So how are you using frictionless data collection to help people quickly give you the details while they are focused on the recovery of their loved ones?
Do you mean how are we what are we doing with the information they give us?
Yeah. So how? Let's suppose I am in distress. There's my child is getting into something like there's a Marchman Act or Baker Act. Now I need to give you information, right? So there's a lot of sensitive data involved. How does your firm ensure that it is as frictionless? Because I don't want to get into another trauma of filling like 20 pages of PDF or sending 10,000 documents.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, I mean, we use quite a bit of technology. I mean, we have a CRM, so Clio, CLIO, and we have Clio Grow, which is our intake CRM.
Mm.
We use Clio Manage, which is our, client CRM. So every call that comes in, right, goes into Clio Grow. If there's a message through the website, it goes into Clio Grow. If there's a message that goes in through our chatbots, right, it goes into Clio Grow. Occasionally, I get an email from somebody. It all goes into Clio Grow, and it allows us obviously. So when somebody calls in and we are triaging the case, meaning we're having a conversation with the potential client about what happened, it's all going into the CRM, so that I can open it up and say, oh, I wonder what was the nature of the conversation, so that everybody in the firm can see the information. So when a paralegal goes to draft a petition, you know, she
Mm.
can read the notes and say, okay, now I have a general idea what happened here. So when they talk to the client, they don't have to go over the whole thing again. So we use that. Now we also have clients fill out some information manually, right? So we can fill in the blanks, because the whole point of the intake conversation is not to go over every single detail. It's just to figure out what's really going on here, and then we can have a conversation with the potential client about what options may or may not be available to them, legal and non-legal. Right? If we get hired on a case and we're going
Mm.
to then sit down and draft an emergency petition, we probably want to get a bit more into the weeds. And a lot of the time we will ask the client to give us that information so that we have it in writing from the client. I mean, it's not going to be 20 pages, but it might be quite a bit of information, because by the time the client gets to us, this has probably been going on for a long, long time. And we need that information, because if we're going to ask the court for extraordinary relief, right, give us a court order without a hearing, the
Mm.
court wants to have enough information to substantiate denying somebody a hearing. So we've got to get some information, but it all ends up going into the CRM. I mean, obviously we use a lot of cloud-based technology. We don't really have any. When I've been doing this 32 years. I got up until about 10 years ago, I had paper files. So beside the fact it was an expensive, right? Every 2 months we were ordering new files, and more paper, which was expensive. We've gone completely paperless. I mean, as a general rule, if I'm going to a hearing, I might print out one thing, but I have my laptop with me because all our files are up in the cloud, and I'm just going to open up the potential, the client's file, and I've gotten used to doing it that way, right? I mean, when I started practicing 32 years ago, I mean, we didn't have the internet, so I would have, if you wanted to file something, you had to mail it or hand deliver it to the clerk of the court, right? And that meant that you also had to send a copy to the judge, you had to send a copy to the other lawyer. It was a nightmare, right? These days, we have an e-filing system here in Florida and also in our federal system, and all I got to do is upload the documents and tell the system, okay, I want it going to this particular county, and off it goes, right? It's very efficient. So we try to use technology as much as we possibly can. And actually, when it comes to technology, one of the big changes that we had, so during COVID, the courts here in Florida, and I think in most states were closed, right? There were no jury trials, but the courts did stay open for the kinds of cases that we have, right? Where we're dealing with emergencies, people who are really in crisis. And what COVID did was it dragged the legal profession kicking and screaming into the 21st century. So all of our hearings went on to Zoom, which was great because now all of a sudden I could cover things all over the state of Florida, which before I couldn't do because I'd have to, no one's going to pay me to drive 8 hours to go to Tallahassee when I'm in the south of Florida. And for the most part, our hearings have stayed on Zoom, which is great. The other thing that happened is that the courts recognized that flying somebody from New York or California for a hearing is just completely inefficient. And they amended some of the statutes that said a witness can now appear virtually. So, for instance, on the case I stayed up, till 12:30 working on, my primary witness, she travels between London and New York. Those are the two places she lives. I'm not flying her in. That's ridiculous. But she can now appear on Zoom, which is great. I mean, I might be in the courtroom, but she's going to be on Zoom, so it's a game changer for us. So that's where the technology has really kicked in. And it's obviously, I went from driving 25,000 miles a year to maybe 12 at best. So that really has been the big technological change for us, in terms of the legal profession. And it's really helped. It's made us a lot more efficient because, there were times where I'd go for a 5-minute hearing. I'd spend an hour in traffic. I'd sit for an hour waiting for the hearing. Then I'd have to an hour back. Well, half the day's gone for a 5-minute hearing, as opposed to I can sit here, in a shirt and tie and a jacket and just wait for the judge to call me. And until he or she does, I'm working. It's so much more efficient.
Yeah, definitely. Now, this is the side of, you and the judge, right? Now, let's suppose you have filed a guardian act for somebody and now they're waiting, right? How do you ensure, because you've helped over 900 families, and I think they're going to grow because the problem isn't going anywhere as we see it today. So how do you ensure that the family feels like they're the only client that you have and they don't feel forgotten during, the waiting hours? How do you ensure you keep giving them updates?
Yeah, so I mean, the way the firm is structured, so me and my wife, obviously the two founders were both attorneys. I handle very few clients at this point. The one that I told you I stayed up for was a very special client. I was asked personally to handle it, so I did. I have one tomorrow, and I'm going to handle that case because my associate who was assigned to the case is going to be in another courtroom or in another courthouse, so I'm going to handle it. So the way the firm is structured is that we have two associates, and they each have their own paralegal and their own case manager. So there's a team of 3 people assigned to each client, and their job is obviously to do the legal work, stay in touch with the client. So, I mean, obviously we're a boutique firm. I'm not handling hundreds of cases at a time. So it's not like, there's lots and lots of cases and people get lost in the shuffle. I also have an office, administrator, and if there's, if we're so busy that the paralegals, or the case manager can't jump on a call because maybe an emergency came in, or maybe a judge set a hearing and we have to suddenly, switch gears and run to court, then she can step up and keep in contact with the client. So we're really good about, staying on top of these things. And clients need to understand that we're here. They need to feel loved, right? And you can understand that. They've come to us, they paid us good money, and they want to make sure they're taken care of. As a general rule, I think we do a pretty good job of doing that. It's very rare that, a client complains about that. And, it's part of our core values. I mean, my staff, we talk about it all the time. I mean, I meet with my entire team at least once a week, and it's drilled into them. You better keep, if a client calls, I expect you to call them back, even on the weekends. They know, right? I mean, as you pointed out correctly at the beginning of the show, this is not Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 work. If a client calls you, 7 o'clock on a Saturday night, I know it's inconvenient and you're with your wife and your children, but I expect you to call them back to find out what's really going on here. Now, some clients will call every phone call. It's an emergency. It's an emergency. It's an emergency. And it's not really an emergency, because if it was, you'd be calling 911. So we have to be a little bit careful, because I mean, we're not an on-call service. We are not, pick up the phone and we're there instantly. If somebody's really in crisis, I expect my team to return the phone call. But if it's just that every phone call is urgent, it's urgent because, everything is a crisis. I cannot expect my staff to return every single phone call because you're having a moment. I mean, that's not fair to us either. And frankly, I expect our clients to work on themselves, right? They should be doing their own work while their loved one is in treatment. They have to work, right? They should be, because while they may not know it, they have been traumatized probably for years by what's been going on, and they need to do work too. I mean, I'm not a clinician. We are not clinical services. I'm certainly glad you refer you to a clinician, and I'm going to be there for you, but you have to do the work too, right? You have to work on you, because if you don't, a year from now, when your loved one is in recovery and you haven't done the work, that's going to be a problem, right? Because when they get to hear recovery, they're a different person, because right now, as they're down here, their mind has been hijacked. They're going to be a completely different person, and it's critical for the families to do their own work. Most good treatment centers have a family program, and I encourage every family who's got a loved one who's in treatment to work the family program, because otherwise I think you're going to find that a year from now, or even 6 months from now, when your loved one is a completely different person, that you're not going to be able to relate. You're not going to know how to handle the situation. And I don't want to have that situation happen. Because that's a problem.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because I remember last year we were working with a refugee lawyer. They had the similar kind of problems, because there a lot of compassion needed there. And we helped them build a client portal where they put their videos so that their clients can see, and then updates were given so they can log in and see. But that helps, but doesn't remove the problem 100%, because somebody can always call you, and at different hours.
That's fine. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with them calling.
Yeah, exactly. Now, here's something that I want to know. For example, we'll move towards people who are now getting into the business of law, right? So suppose I want to start my own law firm. Now, you have been on both sides. You've been the prosecutor. You've been, attorney. You said that niching down is so important, right? When you have, in your experience, you would have faced a lot of lawyers who would do everything, right? And then there would be lawyers who would do just one thing. What is the difference when you're prosecuting and the other side is being the other lawyer? How much difference does it create when somebody is just focused on one single niche in law?
I mean, I don't think it's any different from any other profession, right? I mean, for instance, if when you go to the doctor, right, you might initially go to your general practitioner, but for instance, the last 2 months ago, I had 2 different doctors who told me they thought I had cancer, right? I went to see specialists. I went to see 2 of them because I didn't think the first one did a good job, and the second one was much more thorough. I didn't go back to my general practitioner. I went to a specialist because potentially my life was at risk, right? 2 doctors tell me they thought I had cancer, so I which could have inevitably eventually could have killed me. So I go to a specialist somebody who's got all the expertise in the world to solve my problem. Now, thank goodness it turned out I did not have something and I had a clean bill of health, but I spent 2 months really stressed about this, right? I mean, if you're getting divorced, do you want to go to a divorce lawyer, or do you want to go to a lawyer who does divorce work, car accidents, criminal
Mm.
work, immigration? I mean, it is literally impossible to be a master of more than one subject, right?
Mm.
I mean, I cringe when I see lawyers advertising they do all these different things. And it's not because they're bad lawyers, it's because they don't know any better, right? The one thing they do not teach us in law school, at any law school, anywhere in the country, is the business side of practicing law. They do not teach us that. I spent a year working for a company that teaches just that. So I learned about the business side of practicing law. And one of the things I learned is if you want to be the best, then pick one thing. If you don't care
Mm.
about being the best, then do as much as you want, right? But part of the business side of practicing law, it's not just that you can build a law firm focusing on one collection of people, right? Because I have a lot of resources, because I've spent a lot of time in my field in the behavioral health space, right? But from a business perspective, how do I market to different people? Because the people that need me, right, are not the same people that need immigration services or need a car accident lawyer. So how do I build a marketing
Mm.
machine that focuses on all these different people? If I'm
Yeah.
if I'm going to conferences that focus on behavioral health, how does that help me to build a car accident practice or an immigration practice? It can't be done. Not effectively. How do I even keep up with the laws in all those different arenas? How do I keep up with immigration changes in immigration law or criminal law or the laws that we operate under? How do I keep up with all of the changes? It's impossible. Now, are the lawyers doing it? Yeah, they are. And clients come to us and they might say, well, the guy down the street, he's cheaper. Yeah, but he does 3 different kinds of law and he's a
Mm.
master of none of them. But if you want the cheap lawyer, I'm not the right lawyer for you. Do you want it
Mm.
cheap or do you want it done right? Because there's two
Yeah.
different things. It's impossible to do it right and do it cheap. They don't go hand in hand. They just don't. And if a lawyer's practicing lots of different kinds of disciplines, well, that's fine. I'm not here to tell anybody else what to do. But I don't think you can do the job effectively if you are trying to do different kinds of law, right? If a doctor says you might have cancer, you're not going to a dermatologist
Yeah.
unless you have skin cancer, right?
Mm.
I'm not going to my cardiologist, who I see once a year to get my heart checked up, if I'm being told I have prostate cancer.
Mm.
Not because my cardiologist doesn't know about it, because they teach every law student black letter law in a myriad of disciplines. But it's just enough to get you through the bar exam. It's not enough to make you an expert in that arena. How can it
Mm.
be?
Mm.
Right? Which is
Yeah.
why I think specializing is the way to go, because that's how I think that you get the best results for your clients.
Yeah. And I think ultimately that should be your goal, to get the best results and provide the best value. And you mentioned marketing, right? And that's so true, because if I haven't picked a niche, I would probably, even if I hire somebody like me to do SEO and they say, okay, I'm a lawyer that does everything, it's very difficult for us to market them, because ranking lawyer near me is very difficult. But then ranking somebody like my daughter won't go to rehab is pretty easy. And that's how you can build authority as well. But here's something, it's also a chicken egg problem, because you now run a big firm, right? Somebody who's just going solo, he needs clients, right? And a lot of
Okay,
people are stuck
that's a fair
in the.
comment. That is a fair comment. And actually, and I'll tell you, because when I started this law firm in February of 2016, out of the local library here, I had no money to start a law firm business. I certainly didn't have money for rent. So you're right. I took different kinds of cases. I took criminal cases because I had a background in criminal law. I took family law cases, which I co-counseled with a friend of mine from law school. She had a background in family law. So I also represented a student athlete here in Florida who got himself in hot water with a female
Mm.
student. So I took different kinds of cases to pay my bills. I had to, I was broke. Okay. But once it took me 14 months to get a behavioral
Mm.
health case. Nobody knew who I was. They never heard of me.
Hmm.
Part of what I did was I had cheap business cards made at Vistaprint, probably the cheapest business cards they've ever made, and I bought just enough, right? And I ran around to treatment centers and I handed out my business card. It took 14 months before anybody called me and said, "Hey, I have a Marchman Act case for you." So yeah, I took other kinds of cases, and I don't have a problem with that. But my focus was on getting enough money so I could focus on the one thing,
Hmm.
right? But if I was to have done that for the last 10 years, where I was marketing to people with behavioral health issues and car accidents and divorces and criminal law and immigration, first of all, my marketing budget would be off the charts. I mean, how could I compete effectively with every other immigration lawyer, every other car accident lawyer, every other criminal defense lawyer, every other divorce lawyer? I couldn't do it. I have 825 videos on YouTube talking about one thing, behavioral health. That's it. I don't talk about anything else.
Hmm. That's
Am I
absolutely
a
the right
master of it?
strategy.
Am I a master of it? I don't know. I'm working on it, but I'm not a jack of all trades. Can I walk you through a criminal case? Sure, because I have as a prosecutor and defense lawyer. Can I give you the 10,000-foot overview of a divorce case? I could, because 35 years ago when I was in law school, I took a class on it. Would I want to take that case? No, not for all the money in the world. I'm referring you to a colleague that I trust, that I'd send my own family member to, but I'm not taking that case. I'm not giving you legal advice on that case. It's not what I do. It's not my specialty. It's not my area of expertise. But I'll find you a lawyer who does have that expertise, and I'll send you to that lawyer because I know that they can take care of you and provide you with good legal representation.
Yeah, that's absolutely the right thing to do. Now, the next thing is, let's suppose I do understand I've picked a niche, right? I understand that, okay, the riches are in the niches and obviously the authority that I'm building. Now, here's another problem, right? So I'm just starting my law firm. I don't know what softwares to use. You mentioned Clio, Manage, Grow, and everything else. Obviously, you settled down with that and you're using it. In today's time, there's tens and thousands of softwares. So there's Practice Panther, there's Lawmatics, there's Harvey, and every single day there's a new software that is being released. For a new firm, how important it is and how to basically see the problem and pick the software, and how important and how would they know exactly whether a particular software is the right software for their practice?
Yeah, I used Clio because the company I work for that taught us about being an entrepreneurial lawyer was recommending Clio, and that's how I ended up with it. Are there other
Hmm.
options? There are, but I think generically they all do roughly the same thing.
Hmm.
I mean, none of them are going to practice law for you, right?
Hmm.
You just need something that where your intake that handles your intake. And listen, I'm going to tell you something. I've only been using Clio Grow for probably 3 years or 4 years. Clio Manage I had from day one, but I'm only using Clio Manage for active clients, right? Or for anybody that was a client goes into Manage. For the first 6 years, I used an Excel spreadsheet.
Hmm.
That's how I tracked clients, right? Their name, their phone number, their email, and my notes all went into an Excel spreadsheet. So I did not use technology for a long time when it came to intake. Once we signed up with Clio Grow, because I didn't have all the money for the technology, fine. I was able to upload all that information into Grow. And from here on out, everything goes into Grow. But I didn't use technology right out of the gate. And I don't think you need to. I'd be spending, if you're starting a brand new law firm, I'd be focusing on getting clients. Because if you don't get clients, you can't keep the lights on. And you
Hmm.
can't pay that Clio bill either.
Hmm.
So, and after that, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of conferences, the tech conference. I think Clio has the Clio conference every year,
Hmm.
probably promoting their stuff. I mean, like I said, I think they roughly do all the same thing. I mean, what do you need it to do? You just need your notes in there. Um, my For us, Clio Grow also syncs with Mailchimp. I have a newsletter that goes out every week,
Hmm.
and I've been creating the newsletter since day one. It goes out to 14,000 people every week. So I mean, there's certain things I've been doing, but again, I worked for a company that teaches this stuff, so I understood that it was really important to have, a newsletter list.
Mm.
I mean, it costs money to make the phone ring. So I keep in touch with anybody that's ever called me.
Mm.
So,
Right.
I mean, I learned about making video. I love making video. I love social media. You know why? It's free. And you know
Yeah.
how long it's out there for? Forever.
Forever. Yeah.
It's free and it's there forever. And again, I mean, that's something I learned from a colleague, the guy I work for. And I tell my friends, make video. You know what I make my video with? This. I make a video
Yeah.
on a phone. Sometimes
Yeah.
I just get out of the gym. I'm wearing a baseball cap. I haven't even showered and shaved yet. And I put it out there. And the reason I do that is because it's not just that it's marketing for me, it's that I want to give value to people. They shouldn't
Mm.
have to call a lawyer to get the information they actually need. Okay. It's not on Google. It's not in ChatGPT. Those platforms are giving out garbage. They're giving out the wrong information. I see it all the time. I mean, people will call me and say, "Oh, I found this on Google." Well, how many Marchman Act cases has Google handled? How many
Mm.
guardianship cases has Google handled? How many
Mm.
Baker Act cases has Google handled? Or ChatGPT? Right? Garbage in, garbage out. I'm going to tell you how it really works in the real world based on literally thousands of cases that we've handled.
Mm.
Okay. And I'm going to give it to you for free.
Mm.
How much more value could I possibly give you? If
Yeah.
you want to have a conversation with my team, you can call my intake team and you can talk to them for free.
Mm.
You want to hire me to do legal work? Well, that's how I put food on the table.
Mm.
I'm going to want to be
Yeah.
paid, right? How I keep the lights on. That's how I feed my family and how my staff can feed their families too, because I'm responsible for 15 or 16 other people that work for us. But that is the way to build value for people and help people and be of service is to create
Mm.
content that they can download for free.
Right. So, Mark, this also brings another question. You make videos. By the way, there is a shout out. Mark does his podcast, the Journey podcast. I did listen to one or two episodes. Wonderful podcast. Everybody should listen to it. It's on his website as well. So, looking at doing so many things, right? Obviously, you understand from a business perspective that the founder has to market himself, the founder has to market his firm, and also he needs to put a lot of value and do the sales, right? Now, you've been in the starting, era of the firm as well. I have seen lawyers not doing this instead of doing non-billable work like admin work. They have to send retainers, they have to take calls. Which task do you think are essential to delegate on the day one when you start your firm?
Well, I listen. On day one, you're doing everything. Right? I mean, unless you have resources to hire all these people, you're doing everything. I mean, I told you I started with no money, and even if I'd had
Mm.
money, my focus would have been on making the phone ring, because the business of a law firm is to sell legal services, right?
Mm.
Like every other business, a car dealership, their business is selling and servicing cars. A restaurant, their business is selling food, selling, right? So if you're not selling, you're going broke. So the focus should be on selling legal services. Now, if you're the founder, then you're going to have to be doing the selling and all the legal work and running to court and take care of the marketing, right? And I did all that for 7 years. I did the sales, the marketing, meeting with clients, drafting pleadings, running to court. I did all of that along with my wife for 7 years, 7 days a week. And I still typically work 6, if not 7 days a week. So, I mean, yeah, you're going to have to do everything. And obviously, as the business increases, then you can start hiring people to do things that you don't want to do. For instance, our first hire was an associate. Why? So that the associate could spend time doing the legal work and running to court. That gave me more time to start working on the marketing, right? Creating the content, because the content helps to bring in clients, which increases sales. Then I could hire a second associate. These days, I spend very little time practicing law. Like I said, I had one very special client that came from a personal friend, and I was asked to handle that particular case. I handled it. I'm still handling it. I have a hearing tomorrow because, again, we have overlap, and I'm going to step up and handle the case. I have a little boy who's stuck in a facility, and I'm going to go get him out. But as a general rule, my day is focused on, frankly, speaking to people like you, because this is a marketing piece for me and for you, right? And we're giving away valuable information for free. We're serving, we're producing not just content, but value for people who see this, whether it's potential clients, whether it's entrepreneurs, whoever it might be, because this is sort of a mishmash of different things, right? We're talking about what we do, but we're also talking about the business side of what we do, which I appreciate, right? I appreciate that we've talked about that because it's one of the things I'm passionate about, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that frankly frustrates me about the legal profession. Lawyers always want to tell everybody how brilliant they are. Clients don't care how brilliant you are. They care about the thing that's keeping them up at night. They're right. It's from clients call me. They don't care if I'm the best, if I'm the next F. Lee Bailey or I'm Johnny Cochran. They simply don't care. They don't care what my grades were in law school. They're losing their family. Can I help them? That's the focus, right? That's the mission, to save families. And that should be the mission of every law firm, right? To solve the personal problem of the client. Not to tell them how brilliant you are, because they don't care. It's not important how brilliant you are. There's something that in their life that's consuming them, and they want to know, can you solve that problem? And I'll tell you, again, it irritates me to no end when I go to legal functions. All the lawyers sit there and they tell war stories about how brilliant they are. It just makes me stand back. I don't care how brilliant you are. Tell me how many people that you actually helped. How many people did you help last week, last month, last year? Tell me that. Tell me how many people you affected and made a change in their life for the better. That to me is what I want to hear. I don't care how brilliant you are. It doesn't matter to me. We're here to serve and make a difference in people's lives. You want to tell me about how many people you served, how many lives you changed? That's a conversation I want to have with you. But how brilliant you are, I could care less. I don't care. I'm not interested.
That's right.
You save somebody? Okay, that I want to hear. How smart you are? I couldn't care less. What your grades were in law school? You were on law review? I don't care. I'm not interested. That doesn't serve the purpose.
Yeah, that's actually so true. And this is what I think it's true for every other industry. Nobody cares what you do, how you look. They care if you can solve their problem. And on that note, honestly, Mark, I feel like I have not I have not done justice on this podcast, because you are full of knowledge, and I could have, been sitting with you for many, many podcasts discussing one key area in detail. And I hope I will call you again on some other time.
I'd love to come back. I love the way you do this podcast. How long have you been doing a podcast for?
Oh, it's been like 2-3 weeks. But I
love it.
I'm trying my best to, make my guests as comfortable as they can.
You do a good job.
So
I could tell that you did your homework.
Yeah, I do. I personally.
I can see that, and your audience will know that too. Good for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark.
You care about your audience. You care.
I try. Honestly, I try.
Good for you.
So, Mark, it has been a pleasure. Is there something in the end you want to tell my audience?
Well, yeah, I think if they want to find out more about what we do, can I share my website?
Yes.
So the main website is mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. And if they can't find that, if they just do a Google search of me under Mark Astor, like I said, there's 800 plus videos on YouTube. You should be able to find them. So thank you for having me as a guest. I appreciate you very much.
Yeah, it was lovely. We'll put the links underneath the description. So everyone who's looking for help right now, please contact Mark, because he is the pro at it, and you should always basically buy out of value, not based on pricing. So on that note, it was a pleasure having you, and I hope to see you again, Mark. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. It was good to meet you.